They came early in the morning, before the sun had fully risen, like shadows that didn't belong to the light, and I remember standing there in silence, watching 5 black cars roll into the yard of our small auto service, my brother's place, the only thing he had left after years of struggle, and I could feel something heavy settling in my chest, not fear exactly, but something colder, something older, something I had buried a long time ago. The men stepped out slowly, confident, almost bored, like this was just another job for them, like taking someone's life apart was routine, and maybe for them it was. Their shoes were clean, their jackets expensive, their eyes empty, and at the center of them stood a man who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard, the kind of man people moved for without being asked, the kind of man who never heard the word no. My brother was already outside, his hands shaking slightly, trying to explain, trying to buy time, his voice breaking in a way I had never heard before, and that hurt more than anything, because he was always the strong one, always the one who protected me when we were younger, and now he stood there, small and desperate, in front of men who didn't care about his words or his pain. They told him the debt was due, that the time for talking was over, that everything here now belonged to them, every tool, every car, every inch of ground, and when he tried to argue, one of them laughed, not loud, just enough to show how little this all meant to them. I stayed back at first, leaning against the wall, my hands in my pockets, my head slightly lowered, just watching, just listening, because sometimes silence says more than anger, and I had learned that the hard way. My brother looked at me once, just once, and I saw it in his eyes, the apology, the regret, the fear, and it cut deep. Deeper than any insult those men could throw at us, because he thought this was his fault, he thought he had failed me. The leader stepped forward, calm and slow, and placed a hand on my brother's shoulder like they were friends, like this was just business, and he told him that debts had consequences, that life was about choices, and this was the result of his, and then he nodded to his men, and they started moving, opening doors, checking cars, marking things as if the place was already theirs. I could hear tools being thrown aside, engines being inspected, laughter echoing in the yard, and for a moment, I felt something break inside me, not loudly, not violently, just a quiet crack, like a piece of me giving up. I had promised myself I would never go back, never step into that world again, never become that person again, and for years I kept that promise. I stayed quiet, I stayed invisible, I let the past stay buried, but standing there, watching my brother lose everything, I felt how thin that promise really was. He tried one last time, stepping in front of the leader, his voice trembling but still holding on to some dignity, asking for more time, just a few days, just a chance to fix things, and the man looked at him for a second, almost amused, and then pushed him aside like he was nothing, like he wasn't even worth the effort of anger. My brother stumbled, nearly fell, and that was the moment everything changed, not outside, not for them, but inside me, something shifted, something woke up, something I had kept locked away for years. I straightened slowly, took my hands out of my pockets, and walked forward, each step calm, measured, like I had all the time in the world, even though I knew I didn't, and when I reached them, I didn't raise my voice, I didn't shout, I just spoke quietly, asking them to stop. For a second, they all looked at me, surprised, maybe even confused, because I didn't look like a threat. I wasn't loud, I wasn't aggressive, I was just a man in worn clothes, standing in front of people who owned half the city. The leader smiled slightly, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, and asked me who I was supposed to be, and I told him I was just his brother, nothing more, nothing less, and that we could fix this, that there had to be another way. He laughed then, louder this time, and his men joined in, the sound echoing in the empty spaces of the yard, and he told me that people like us don't get another way, that we get what we deserve, and that today, we were losing everything. I nodded slowly, like I understood, like I accepted it, and for a moment, I almost believed it myself, almost believed that this was it, that this was how it ended, but then I looked at my brother again, at the way he stood there, defeated but still trying to hold himself together, and I felt something else, something small but strong, a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end yet. I took a step closer to the leader, close enough that he could see my face clearly, and I asked him one more time to stop, not as a plea this time, but as a warning, though I didn't raise my tone, didn't change my expression, and that seemed to irritate him more than if I had shouted. He leaned in slightly, his smile fading, his eyes narrowing, and he told me that I was starting to annoy him, that I should step back before things got worse for me, and I could feel the tension rising around us, his men watching closely now, waiting for a signal, waiting for something to happen. I stayed still, calm, patient, because patience had always been my strength, even back then, especially back then, when everything moved faster and mistakes cost more than just money. I told him quietly that he didn't know who I used to be, and he shook his head, almost bored again, saying it didn't matter, that the past doesn't change the present, and for most people, he would be right, but not for me, not today. I reached into my pocket slowly, not for a weapon, not for anything dangerous, just for a small, worn phone, and I dialed a number I hadn't used in years, a number I had sworn I would never call again, and as it rang, I could feel my heart beating harder, not from fear, but from the weight of what I was about to do. The leader watched me, curious now, maybe a little cautious, and when the call connected, I didn't say much, just a few quiet words, a name, a location, and then I hung up, slipping the phone back into my pocket like nothing had happened. For a moment, nothing changed, the men still stood there, the yard still looked the same, the world didn't shift or shake, and the leader smiled again, telling me that whatever I just did, it wouldn't save us, that this was already over. I didn't argue, didn't try to convince him, I just nodded and stepped back, returning to my place near the wall, my hands back in my pockets, my face calm, because now, all I had to do was wait. Time moved slowly after that, each second stretching out, each sound sharper than before, the scrape of metal, the low voices of the men, the distant hum of the city waking up, and my brother stood beside me now, not saying anything, just breathing heavily, trying to understand what was happening, trying to hold on to whatever was left. Minutes passed, maybe 5, maybe 10, it felt longer, and then we heard it, not loud at first, just a distant sound, like something approaching from far away, and one of the men noticed it too, looking toward the road, his expression shifting slightly. The leader turned his head, annoyed more than concerned, and then the sound grew louder, clearer, the unmistakable noise of engines, multiple engines, powerful and fast, and suddenly, the mood changed. Just a little, just enough to be felt. Black cars appeared at the end of the road, more than the ones they had brought, moving quickly, stopping sharply near the entrance, and doors opened almost in sync, men stepping out with a different kind of presence, not loud, not aggressive, but controlled, precise, and very, very serious. The leader's smile disappeared completely now, his eyes scanning the newcomers, trying to understand, trying to calculate, and I could see it in his face, the first hint of doubt, the first crack in his confidence. One of the men from the new group walked forward, calm and steady, his gaze moving from the leader to me, and when our eyes met, he gave a small nod, a sign of recognition, of respect, something the others didn't understand, but the leader noticed it. He looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time, as if trying to see past what I appeared to be, trying to piece together something he had missed, and I could almost hear the moment it clicked in his mind, the moment he realized this wasn't just some quiet brother standing in the corner. The man who approached spoke softly, but his words carried weight, addressing the leader by name, telling him that this situation was over, that he had made a mistake coming here, and that it would be wise for him to leave, now. The leader tried to hold his ground, tried to push back, to remind everyone who he was, what he controlled, but the confidence was gone, replaced by something tighter, something uncertain, and when he looked around, he saw it, the numbers, the positions, the reality of the situation shifting against him. For a long second, no one moved, no one spoke, and then, slowly, the leader stepped back, just one step, but it was enough to show that the balance had changed. He looked at me one last time, his eyes filled with something between anger and realization, and without another word, he turned, signaling his men to leave, and just like that, they did, getting back into their cars, driving away the same way they came, but not with the same confidence. Silence returned to the yard, heavy but different now, and my brother stood there, staring at me like he didn't recognize the person in front of him. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past settle back onto my shoulders, and for a moment, I wished things had gone differently, that I hadn't needed to make that call, that the life I left behind had stayed buried, but sometimes, the past doesn't stay where you leave it, sometimes it comes back when you need it the most. I walked over to my brother, placed a hand on his shoulder, the same way that man had done earlier, but this time, it meant something different, and I told him quietly that everything was going to be okay, that the shop was still his, that no one was taking anything today. He didn't say anything, just nodded slowly, his eyes filled with emotion he couldn't put into words, and I understood, because some things don't need to be said. The men who had arrived with those cars stayed for a while, making sure everything was settled, making sure no one came back, and then they left too, just as quietly, leaving me standing there in the same place I had been at the beginning, but not the same person. The yard looked the same, the tools, the cars, the worn walls, but something had changed, something invisible but real, and as the sun finally rose higher in the sky, I realized that justice doesn't always come loud or fast, sometimes it comes quietly, patiently, waiting for the right moment, and when it does, it doesn't need to shout, it just needs to be seen.